Hey y'all, hey. Good evening, everybody. How is everybody doing? This is an introduction to the recap of our support group this past Tuesday on the 28th, where we had our reentry specialist, Dion Crockett, who joined us to give us words of wisdom, to provide us some education, to let us know of some community resources for our returning neighbors coming back home from incarceration. It was an amazing support group. So good, in fact, that we want to have as a collective, we want to have Dion come back and join us every so often, maybe even once a quarter. He was that good. So Dion, when you see this video, thank you so much for spending your time with us that evening and helping the ladies through some difficult, challenging situations and even things that we just have questions about with our returning loved ones, some who have returned already and some who will be returning home soon. So thank you again. I want to be sure to clarify that while the session we had with Dion was recorded, we didn't record about the first 20 minutes of it. We introduced ourselves, and Dion started sharing his background information. So we didn't get about the first 20 minutes, but just as a brief introduction, wanted to let you know that Dion covered a myriad of things, from trauma that are oftentimes our sons and our husbands face while being incarcerated, how the person that went in is not necessarily the person that is going to come home. And he talked to us about his background in cognitive behavioral therapy, and how to listen and how to speak to our loved ones using active listening, building trust and building rapport. Somebody that to show that we are people, family, and friends that can be trusted by them because of their experiences. How to create healthy boundaries for ourselves and for them. It was an amazing session. So the video that you're going to see is edited to show snippets of our session so as to protect the privacy of our support group members, some with sensitive topics that we were discussing. Everybody's anonymity is of utmost importance. So we're going to show you some important parts of our conversation with Dion, and I pray that everybody gets out of it what can pertain to them. Awesome. So you guys know what it is. I would be remiss without saying this, that a journey to healing is a path walked by faith in Christ to gain true freedom and experience abundant life. Faith, freedom, life.
From your lens, you have him doing A, B, C, and D, and he's working at Z, Y, X, going backwards. It's frustrating. That's what I earlier when I was saying that language, we're really talking the same language, but we're at different parts of the book. And celebrate the wins with him, but also kind of slide in the information that needs to be slid in. You know, I'm happy you went and got your, you paid your fines. That's responsible. I'm glad you're trying to get out of that cycle of the driving cycle. But this is just as important. Let's talk about the employment piece. You have an opportunity to make $25, $30 an hour. I get that you need to have the transportation, but we got to take baby steps to get to where we want to go at. I talked about that instant gratification. In his mind, I'm just guessing. I can get my driver's license. I can go out and get a great job. I ain't thought about gas. I ain't thought about how much it's going to be for insurance because I ain't driven in 20 years. I ain't thought about maintenance on the car. I ain't thought about where I'm going to live at, because I'm still staying with my dad, even though it's just temporary housing. All those things got to be kind of fed to him, spoon fed, and it has to be given to him in a way that you're celebrating it instead of disappointed in him in the direction that he's going. Yep. And you have to allow him to have that space to be able to make mistakes. You know, sometimes making a mistake is a great learning opportunity. You know, as family, as support, we have to be able to pick the pieces up. As you alluded earlier, he has been in and out of incarceration. So he has fallen a couple of times. The key is to try to be there to soften that blow a little bit, but then to also water that seed that you planted. Be like, hey, you know what? We tried it your way. Let's look at it a little bit different now and go a different route. Because men, we're going to be men. We're going to go out and we want to try to do it on our own, regardless of what someone is telling us, whether it's right or wrong. Oftentimes, we have to have a big piece of humble pie before we realize that we can't do it on our own, and it's okay to ask for help. But now also utilize other vessels. Did you say he has sisters?
Yes.
You know, utilize them to have that same conversation with them. You have to realize that you're mom, and at the end of the day, it's going to be hard to take that pill from mom when it comes, you know, but somebody closer to his age that can have a little bit of a different conversation with him may be able to get the same message out, and he may receive it a little bit differently. You know, we have to understand too that I may not be the right person to deliver the message. You know, I may have to utilize somebody else on my team to be able to have that conversation with them. And there's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, our common goal is to stay out, be productive, and live, you know, a life that you could be proud of, overcoming any obstacles that you may have had in the past.
Okay.
Oh, if I can chime in real quick, just as, and Dion, I'm sorry, Dion, correct me if I'm saying something off here, but it's, I mean, it seems to be, especially Dion, when you mentioned that when they come out, they feel insecure a lot of times, and that they, you know, control of their life has been taken away from them. And I think I know, especially for men, yeah, we want to be proud of ourselves. We want to demonstrate that we can do something on our own and earn respect. And I think sometimes it's difficult when somebody else says, okay, you need to do A, B, and C. Well, now it's not mine anymore. Now, even if I do it, it's not something that I did that you can be proud of. I'm just doing what you're telling me to do. And so I think a lot of times, and I don't know how to do it, I don't have good answers, but I think a lot of times it needs to be a way to get them to think of the idea themselves, or to guide them without them feeling like you're stealing their idea.
I often tell people it is my job to feed people and they don't even know that they're eating. You know, I want people to, when I talk to them 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they're like, you know what, I kind of heard something about that. And they take it for their own idea and they run with it. That's when you win. You know, that's what I mean by planting that seed and letting it germinate. You know, it's not going to happen right now for everyone. You know, I'm sure we've all seen the light bulb flicker with our loved ones. Like, oh, I think they got it. And then it goes completely dark and we're like, well, what happened? You know, it happens with teenagers. It happens with, you know, as we're trying to raise our kids. I see just today, my 17-year-old is learning how to drive. He did a great job for about a mile. We pull up to his mother's house and the wheels fall off. And he gets mad at me because he tells me I'm yelling at him. And I'm like, well, I don't want you to kill us. I don't want us to get in an accident. But all the things that I had told him before then completely went out the window. He didn't even remember it, didn't even talk about it. And then when we got back to my house, you know, we had a long conversation and I just had to tell him that, you know, it's out of love. At the end of the day, you're going to get tough love. At the end of the day, I'm going to have things that I'm going to say to you that you may not like, but I know these things work. I'm going to give you the tools. It's up to you to use them when you want to use them. We can't get mad at them just because they're not using the tools when we expect them to use them. Give it to them Eventually, they will start using them. The goal is to know that they have support. The fact that your son knows that he has support from his mother, his father, and his siblings, I can tell you now, he's 95% farther than anybody else coming home from incarceration. A lot of guys that have done that much time, they've lost loved ones. They've, their mother, father have passed while they were incarcerated. People have written them off and forgotten about them, because they were gone for so long. So he knows what he has. It sounds like to me, you're just too close right now to be able to deliver that information. So plant the seed, use a different vessel, and try to get your point across a different way. But celebrate the wins. Have to celebrate wins.
If I may ask a question here, you spoke earlier about teaching the language, and here in support with the participants, I think that communication is what a lot of us may be lacking on how to communicate. So I would be interested in those tools, or whatever tools that you have, or the resources to learn the language.
Yeah, one of the things that I used to teach cognitive behavior therapy, and it's all about reception and what we're hearing them say. A lot of times I repeat back to people when I'm talking to them, so I make sure that I'm on the same page. And that's really what I mean by the language. Because we could be sitting and having a conversation and you could hear one thing and he could be saying something totally different. I always ask for permission to talk when they're ready to have that conversation. It would go somewhere like this, just so I understand. I just want to be clear, and it's usually a lot more street language with me because I get gutter like that. But I repeat back what I've heard from them, and then I just regurgitate it and let them find the answer within that. But while I'm regurgitating it back to them, I'm planting that seed about what direction they need to go and why they need to go. Like I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names and it's not up on my screen, but the lady that I was just talking to, if her son, if that was somebody that I was working with and he wanted to go out and get his driver's license, that conversation would have been, he would have explained everything to me and I would have repeated it back to him. And I'd have been like, so what does it look like once you get your license? What is the next step and why? To have him answer that so he could be able to think about it and process it. Once again, we run with what we feel they need to be doing. And sometimes success is just not going back to jail. It may not be getting a job. It may not be, unfortunately, getting your own place. They may, you don't want to come across as therapeutic because they're programmed out. I'm telling you, they've gone through programming the whole time when they were incarcerated. It has to have a personal touch to it. And really at the end of the day, you will find that everybody wants the same thing. It's just how do we get to the goal? There's different roads that people take. And once again, we can't get frustrated with someone when they want to take a different road.
Because at the end of the day, the goal is for them not to go back. And that may be the success in and of itself. If they're not back incarcerated, it's a win. It's a win.
It's definitely a win. Everybody takes a little bit longer to find their path. I've worked with guys that they figured it out in 6 months. I've worked with guys and they're working on 5-7 years. I've worked with guys that have done well for 2-3 years and they fall apart, and they start back over. Recidivism, there is no universal definition to it. A lot of these guys are coming home. They're going to be on post-release control. Their freedom is still their probation parole officer still controls that freedom. And it could be something as simple as being late to an appointment. They can violate you. Doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you weren't trying to do the right thing. It's just other factors that are in play right now that makes it difficult for people to be successful the way that we want them to be.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. So here's another, I want to know if you had any experience with this or heard about this. So my son was on house arrest when he came home for 4 months, a little over 4 months. And he said that he had heard it from other guys and didn't really put too much into it until he experienced it himself. So as you get released, there's high excitement and whatnot, just being on the other side of the gates. And then you usually at Talbot House or, a halfway house somewhere. And then when you come home from there and you on house arrest with the ankle bracelet on, he said it's a different kind of frustration. It's a different kind of anxiety being released, but not being free. Because you like right there, but you can't touch it, so to speak. And he said that, the pacing or just being able to go outside the front door, the back door only so far. He said that's another
It's a trigger.
Yeah.
It's like being incarcerated. It's like going into the yard while you're at prison. The gate is there. You can see the highway, but I can only go 50 feet out. Some of the worst times I think when guys get released is in the springtime because everybody wants to be out. I've done 10 years. Now I got to sit in the house and look out my front window and look at what everybody else is doing. I go back to the structure and them taking orders and being told how they have to do things. They're still being treated as if they're incarcerated. So they still have that wolf mentality. Mm-hmm. And it is so difficult to be able to help someone when they feel that their mind is still locked up. Mm-hmm. They're still at Leavenworth. They're still at Chillicothe, whatever institution, but yet they're at home with their girlfriend, their mother, their grandmother, and they're stuck in these four walls. All that does is play on the mental side of it, that institutionalized how people feel like when they come home. All that does is reinforce that, yep, I'm still here. I'm still within, it may not be a 4x4 or whatever the size of a cell is, but I'm in a 500-foot square home that I can't go and do anything. I have to ask for permission to go to the grocery store, doctor's office, look for employment, anything. I can't do anything. And it is dehumanizing because I'm holding the carrot in front of you, you're chasing it, and I'm like, you almost got it. You almost got it. But if you slip up, I'm going to take it from you. Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine living like that. Yeah. And I could only imagine how that makes them feel.
Dion, what's the mind? I don't understand something there. What is the mindset behind house arrest, right? I mean, if you have an ankle bracelet on, it's not stopping you from doing something. So if you're still going to go out and commit a crime, that ankle bracelet's not going to stop you. So I don't see what the difference is between just releasing them, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm releasing you and you have to stay in your house. Well, if they stay in the house, they probably also would have been fine if they didn't stay in the house. So what's the logic behind that, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, now with the technology they have, they could put a parameter around wherever you're staying at, and they will be alerted right away if you breach that parameter. So the idea behind it is I'm going to slowly release you back to society and allow you to get used to, let's just take cell phones and how cell phones have changed over the course of 10, 15 years. I'm slowly going to allow you to get used to what society is and how we deem our rules to be. And if you get out of line, I'm going to take that freedom away from you because you have proven that you don't even want to follow the simplest of instructions of staying in the house and allowing yourself to be free, even though it's house arrest, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Mhm. So the goal of it is to help them slowly reacclimate type deal.
If you talk to someone at the state, yes.
Okay.
I think it has an adverse reaction to it. I think it hurts from a mental health standpoint. I don't think it allows people to grow.
Mhm.
You know, if you've served your time, what is the purpose of being put on house arrest?
Mhm.
You know, post-release control is supposed to be allowing you to have access to all the resources that are in the community to be able to be successful. It's not meant to be punitive. The punitive piece of it was the sentencing and when you got incarcerated. You know, now you just have to follow the rules to be able to stay free. And to tell somebody that they got to stay in their house for 6 months because they got released early, what's the purpose of releasing them?
I'm curious if I can ask one more, because you touched on that subject a little bit, and that is, you know, if someone served their time, right, whatever society said, you did your 5 years, you did your 10 years, you're done. You should be done. But yet we have a society where, right, your court records are open, they're public access. When you go to apply for a job, you know, they can go to GIS or one of the other services and say, you know, okay, here's Bob Jones and here's where he lived. And they'll say, oh yeah, you know, he just got out, and you know where that resume is going to go. Is there anything in the works, or has anybody raised any concerns that, you know, it seems like we're talking out of both sides of our mouths. We say we want you to reintegrate into society, then we make it impossible to do so. We almost force recidivism on the people that are leaving, because if you get out and you can't get a job, you know, you can't take care of your family, you can't, you know, all the things that you now can't do, how are you supposed to integrate?
I will say this: employment is probably easier than housing, especially in Hamilton County. Employers are a lot more forgiving now and giving people second and third chances. The question becomes, are they giving them livable wages? And I think that's the next hurdle that needs to be jumped over. Stability is needed for anyone to be successful. And I could make $80,000 a year. And if I can't have a place to live, eventually that employment's going to go bye-bye. One of the things that I talk with individuals with is about their credit scores and about becoming homeowners, because it's almost impossible to get into any type of safe housing, low crime areas with the record. So to answer your question, the normal 10 hurdle race for a normal person is going to be a 25 to 30 hurdle race for someone with the record. And that's why that support is critical. And that's why it's critical for us not to give up on them or get frustrated with them when they're not going the path that we think that they should go.
Can you talk to us more about, so how to integrate? I heard the answer to that question: employment, becoming homeowners, and a credit score, 3 foundational things. So so home ownership, even for, you know, us people who haven't been incarcerated, is like a big thing. How do you present it to them to make it sound and, you know, help them to buy into that is possible? And what are the steps that you tell them to take?
You know what? I think we make home ownership a lot harder than what it really is. I mean, there's some hurdles there. When I first bought my first house, time consuming. It wasn't difficult. It was about proven income and having a credit score that was acceptable to be able to get a decent rate. One of the things I talk to them about is most of these guys don't have credit. You know, they may have had Duke Energy, they may have had a cell phone or something in their name, but for the most part, they don't have a lot of credit that's out there. And it's about opening up a secured credit card and building that credit. When we're doing financial literacy, we pull their credit scores, we take a look at it, see how we can help them, and we make suggestions at what directions they want to go. I also have a friend of mine that works for, I think it's US Bank, and he does FHA loans for first-time home buyers. With the credit score as low as 580, he can get them an FHA loan. So I put them in contact with them to have them work with them to walk them through that process. I also explained to them that it's not a quick fix. You know, it's going to take probably anywhere from 12 to 24 months to be ready to get into some type of home ownership. But I let them drive the bus. If they want to try it their way, that's fine. They could take that 12 and 24 months and they could turn into 24 to 36 months. And that's what I mean by sometimes you have to let people kind of fail and invest in their own survival and figure it out on their own. I see a lot of good in a lot of people. When I'm talking with them, they don't quite see it in themselves. And that's okay. My job, like I said earlier, is to keep you out of prison so you don't go back. As we're going through this process, I hope that you will figure it out. And it really is a process. And it takes a while, depending on how deep the hole is, for people to dig themselves out of it.
Is it really? So, you know, a lot of us in this group, I think, you know, when we've had loved ones come home, they come home to support, thank God. But I mean, do you see a lot of guys like come home to nobody and nothing?
See, a lot of guys get released from Talbot House, Volunteers of America, to the homeless shelter because they have nothing, no one. They burnt bridges with their family and no one's willing to work with them. I see them get into toxic relationships with women that's controlling, that when the spouse or girlfriend gets mad, they throw them out. You know, I see women coming home and they get into abusive relationships because they have nowhere to go. And it's without support, it's almost impossible to make it.
Wow. So one of the things that's really important, you know, that's been interwoven into the messaging, the narrative, the mission of Faith Freedom Life is the mental health piece. You know, we had an event last year, Shannon was there, that focused on mental illness as it pertains to incarceration. So when you recommend counseling to the guys who come home, what are the resources that are out there that, you know, I've heard from return neighbors that, okay, and Dion is the one that got me hip to the term returning neighbors as opposed to returning citizens, because that's the goal, is for them to become our neighbors, right? And so what are the resources? I've heard that counseling services and therapists and whatnot through Medicaid can be a challenge. So what are the resources out there that they can afford and hopefully give for free?
A lot of the services, exclusive services, they're a Black-owned therapy organization. They do outpatient. Then you have, I stay away from like the Talbot houses, the GCBs, because they're just kind of state run. You're more of a number with them. I try to go with some of the smaller agencies. I've had a lot of success with exclusive. I'm drawing a blank, but there's a spot out here in Liberty Township that they have a satellite office at Christ Hospital. It's, I can't think of the name of it, I'm sorry. But they see people outpatient. If it's substance abuse, exclusive services, once again, has a sober living home, New Foundations, sober living. There's an organization called the LIT program, which is faith-based, which they do sober living and mental health. And these are all individuals from all different walks of life that have gone through things. And they're able to connect with our loved ones on a level that we're not able to connect with them on, because they can share those stories. They understand where they're at in the process. They understand why they may want to go out and get an employment right away instead of investing in themselves. They get it. These are conversations that we can't have because 9 times out of 10, we haven't been in those shoes.
So you said exclusive services, that's what it's called, like on the web, and then LIT, LIT.
Yeah, and what I can do, Michelle, is I can get you the information and text it to you so you can share it with the group.
That would be so good. And I wonder, so I have a resource page on the website, and I just, as you know, I've been going along, just putting resources out there on the page and, you know, different websites and things. I wonder if I could do that, because mental health services are just, gosh, as I was saying last year, it's like a double whammy. People don't want to talk about the fact that they've been incarcerated, then add on mental health and mental illness on top of that. Then they really don't want to talk about it. And then when they on the inside is not even being dealt with or treated. And a lot of people is incarcerated in the first place because they have mental illness and shouldn't even be in prison.
Yeah, I mean, it is a double-edged sword. I will say that Hamilton County Sheriff McGuff, she has been really good at more of treatment instead of incarcerating people. You know, she really wants to help individuals. She understands that it's bigger than just crime. And if you think about it, a lot of our loved ones get locked up for nonviolent offenses that if they took a different approach, they could probably have a little bit more success.
Yeah, agreed. Wow. Yes, I would really love to have that list of resources and then get permission to put it on the website so that people can know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely get you their information and the contact information so you could talk with them.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the group, the Life Freedom that Michelle is organizing, that's really what it's about. It's offering that support for everyone. As far as once he comes home, definitely, I would do what I can do to help.
Appreciate that.
Who is our reentry mentor. He's volunteered to act as our mentor for any of our sons, you know, coming home.
That's a very hard age to work with. Is it drug trafficking that he got incarcerated for? Got you. That's a hard age. Oftentimes, when they're that young, they just haven't bumped their head enough in the judicial system to really understand the actions, the consequences of their actions. So he's on PRC. Okay. The key, it sounds like to me, is going to be getting him, is he on medication? Okay. That's going to be the key, is trying to get him to be medicated. And I'm assuming he may be self-medicating himself with marijuana, which is a pathway to destruction, especially nowadays with all the fentanyl and everything that they're putting in. The number one thing that I would say for him is there anybody in his network that he could talk to that's maybe been through that path? Well, let's do this. Michelle, you can give her my number.
Okay.
And let's see if we could try to figure out something to try to help me before they violate him.
Could you also speak on family members setting boundaries? We talk a lot about boundaries here in support. And so could you speak on that, or the approach that the loved ones and families should take with that, without making them feel, to be stern, without making them feel like they're incarcerated all over again?
So I'm a firm believer in a hand up and not a handout. The hardest thing for the family is to tell a loved one no. That's probably the easiest thing I could tell people is no. It's not within my job description. Can't do it. Reason why is because at the end of the day, we love our children, our loved ones. We also know that they can be manipulative. We also know that they can take advantage. You have to be able to put yourself in a position to protect yourself. And that's hard when you don't want your son or your daughter to go back to prison, or you don't want them to be upset with you. But I go back to that language and putting it back in their lap and saying, well, why? Why is this why do you necessarily need this? And then having a conversation about it and explaining why you feel, or giving them other options to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish. But it's a hard conversation to have. And it's easy to sit here and tell somebody that I would tell them no until I get put in that position. And then, we all have empathy and care about people. But if you give in, trust me, it's only going to open the floodgates for more.
What I had, we've talked about it in group before, something that I introduced that I learned from somebody else, Maslow's hierarchy. So it's a triangle, and have you heard of? Yep.
And then those are the boundaries that you have to set. And you have to put it back in their lap, and let them make a decision off of what that conversation looks like. And you have to stand firm. You can't want to give in because they may be doing well. They may be doing something good. And this is like a reward for them. No, make them work for it, because it gives them confidence. It gives them a sense of being successful, and I can go out and do this on my own instead of having somebody giving it to me.
Wow. You know what? That's really good.
It is. You got to stick by your guns. You got to stay true to yourself. And you have to realize too that it's a race. It's a slow sprint. It's not a 30-yard dash, 50-yard dash. We're trying to set things into place for long term, so they can be able to navigate and get around and do things on their own. I can only imagine. He knows not to ask mom that, probably start looking for a place sometime soon after that, so he can, live by his rules, which is fine, because that's the goal, is to keep him out and live by his rules.
Yeah. Okay, you guys. So it looks like we are about out of time. Does anybody have any final questions for Dion? Dion, this has been so good. It's so valuable. I mean, you have just kept it all the way 100 with us, and we understand it. It makes sense, and it's like gold to be able to hear from a man. I would love to invite you back at some other time to check in with us and speak with us and allow the ladies to ask you questions down the line.
Yeah, that's fine. I would love to.
Well, Dion, thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go ahead and close out in prayer. Gosh, thank you. And we keeping up with each other, me and you.